And look at that. We are live with today's pre-show of our 220-1202. That is our Core 2 A+ study group. I have all questions for you. This is our pre-show part where we start at the top of the hour, but we're about 10 minutes before getting into this. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching this on the replay, we will be getting started in approximately 9 minutes and 15 seconds. So we are ready to go with our Core 2 study group. This is our second study group of the week. So this has been a good week. We had an A+ study group for Core 1 2 days ago, and today's our Core 2 study group. So we are working it. We are trying to get everything going here. I'm checking things here. We're recording down bottom right. This looks good. Looks like I knocked it. There we go. Straighten it up. It's straight on my side. I realize to you it's listing, but that's just because the camera is at a weird angle behind me. That's our bird cam. That's back there. That's behind me. Hi, bird cam. Hi. Hello. Hi. Good to see you. It's sort of in an odd angle, but it works great. Hello, Mal. Good to see you. Hope things are doing well down in the St. Vincent area in the Caribbean. We're ramping up, aren't we? Everybody's getting ready for season. And for those of you that don't live in the Gulf states or the Caribbean, then you don't have to worry about it so much. I guess these days you sort of do up the coast in the Carolinas and even up into New York. They do quite a bit. Sometimes those storms do roll up there a bit. But right now we're doing good. Right now it's fine. We're in that normal afternoon. For those of you not familiar, we are based out of Florida, Central Florida. So we have the afternoons thunderstorms that come through in the summer. That's how you know that summer is still here, is because every day it's going to rain. Every day there will be lightning. I'm surprised I'm able to get anything done because when the storms get close, we shut all of this down. I've got it all set up. It is on a UPS, but I shut down the UPS. I shut down all of this. I shut down the UPS. I physically unplug everything on this desk from anything in the outside world. So that's one of the things that we do just because of where we live. So that way I'm completely unplugged. If we get hit by lightning or lightning hits somewhere nearby and finds its way over to us through some piece of copper, it won't be able to hit anything on this desk because I've created an island. There is a moat. It is an air gap between this desk and anything else in the world. So that's how we do it. But that's sort of normal. You just sort of get used to it. The surprising part is how early or late in the afternoon is it going to hit? Because then I figure out how much can I type, and then I have to stop typing and then sort of move into laptop mode where I'm disconnected from everything. So this is today is our 220-1202 course. It's the new one, not the old one. It's the new one. So today we are doing all A+ Core 2 content. I have all new questions for you. And of course, I will be taking questions in the second hour. If you would like to put your virtual pin in our virtual pin cushion, you can do that in our map to show where you are joining from. And you can click on this map. It's a little bit interactive. See, we see Malk out there. There he is out in the Caribbean. And then the rest of us here in North America, we got some folks checking in from South America. South Africa is here. I'm waiting for the folks over in Europe and Asia to catch us, maybe even Australia occasionally. We get them in there. So we will be going through those questions today. We have a lot to go through. There is so much to work through. The whole Core 2, the new information. Of course, we're also working on producing new content on this side. Practice exams books are being rewritten, which is exciting. And they're so good now. I love when there's new content. When you do the same exam objectives for 3 years, it's kind of nice when the new exam objectives show up because there's new material. A lot of that new material will be in this study group today. So a lot of the new material will be in the new practice exams books because you need to know the new content along with the content that was carried over from the previous version. So we have a lot to work on. We have a lot to go through. and we will be going through all of that. We got about just under 4 or 5 minutes to go. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I'm watching the clock. We're trying to figure it out. We will get all of this done. You need to know about cybersecurity. Well, I guess you should. It's always important. It's always useful. I'm pretty big on cybersecurity, considering that is ultimately where I ended up in this industry, was finally made it down to the cybersecurity side. So that was always good. I loved it. I loved working. Mine was more of next-gen firewall, blue team type support cybersecurity, but it was great. We really, really did have a lot of fun. And now this is what I do full time. So I guess technically I'm still in the business of cybersecurity, since we have so many security things we have to work through. But we are definitely, it was definitely a fun time working on the cybersecurity side. Plus, I got to meet a lot of really nice people in a lot of different companies. It's always interesting. It's always good to have a job where everything is interesting to you, and it was in my case. I love the cybersecurity side. It is a line of work, a series of topics you do sort of have to work up into. You can't just sort of start as an expert in cybersecurity. You need to understand operating systems. You need to have a detailed understanding of networking, and perhaps even some protocol work in there as well would help you. But you can't secure it unless you know how it works. So there you go. Do I offer a physical class for the Security Plus SY0701? I don't offer any physical classes other than these live streams. We of course do these live streams, but I don't do formal classroom teaching. I don't go to a facility, or I don't have an online real-time class. Everything I do is with our training videos, our live content here, that type of thing. So we will see. Can you tell us in Hindi? There is quite a bit of work going on right now on YouTube to automatically create an AI synthesized version that talks other languages. So I'm not sure which ones they put into the first set, but I know that anything I had been uploading supposedly was available for that, but it's not something I can configure. It's just done automatically on the YouTube side. I don't have, other than that, I don't really have plans to add additional language support, mostly because it's sort of getting integrated into YouTube automatically. So we'll see how that goes. About 2 minutes to go till we get started. But it's kind of that's kind of interesting, though, to see what we are doing with some of these technologies. That's a very good use of some very smart programming that we are calling AI, but really is not. That's what most AI is. Not AI. Most AI is just stuff we've done. It's very interesting because for example, we've been doing Photoshop for how many years now? And now when you show Photoshop, oh, it's AI deleted the background. It's Photoshop deleted the background. We're just calling it AI now. But there's some real AI stuff going on that is incredibly interesting, with large data sets, finding and solving problems that we simply cannot solve because there's too much data. Those types of things are encouraging and fascinating. But creating bad pictures and bad audio, that's not really very worthwhile for anyone. So we will see. We like it. We will get through it. So right now we are less than a minute, 30 seconds away from getting started. Let's do a final check. Cameras look good. The stream looks fantastic. I did have a power outage this morning, like at 7:30 in the morning, and had to sort of reset everything to make sure everything was okay today. So my fingers are crossed that we are going to have solid power. If not, just hang on. I will be right back to you, or I'll tell you interesting things about that once we get to that point. Okay, it is time to do our core 2 study. I do have a UPS, but it didn't matter. It did not matter because it was on the carrier side. It was on the ISP side. Look at that, 12 noon, everybody. Let's get Keynote up and running. Let's, because I am UPS'd up. I'm in Florida in the summer. You bet I have a UPS. I have multiple UPSs every there. I think it's time for a live stream. Let's get this off the screen. Let's get this on the screen. And let's get started, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2025 Professor Messer 220-1202 Core 2 A+ study group. That is a mouthful, but what that means is that I will be asking you questions today that come directly from the 220-1202 exam objectives. And you, if you are here live, will get to participate interactively and answer these questions online with the rest of us. So this is something we love to put together. It is something that hopefully you can enjoy during this first hour. But if you are watching this on a replay, you can still participate. Just make a note of the questions and the answers as we go through them, and you'll do just fine. If you are here live, you can participate by popping open a new browser window and go to professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that is on your screen there. professormesser.com/QA will take you there. We have a lot of information to go through, so we're going to first start with a question. Before we get into that information, this is actually a question we did in a previous study group. We call this our rewind question to see if you're able to get in and answer the questions correctly online. So this question is one that asks, a company is looking for security controls to protect against BEC. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Our standing rule in our live stream is please do not put the answers in the chat. Please don't put any hints in the chat. Instead, you want to follow the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to submit your answer. So the question again is, a company is looking for security controls to protect against BEC. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Is it block all non-encrypted web pages, require visible visitor badges, update the spam filter, use a third party for storage drive destruction, or encrypt all laptop drives? So this is a good question. In fact, the chat room's already asking, well, what is BEC? Well, that's part of the question. You have to know that to be able to answer this question. If you think you know the answer, please use the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room, and please no hints in the chat room. Well, we have a lot that is going on. We're going to come back to that question in just a moment. So make sure you get your questions plugged in at professormesser.com/QA. Thank you for joining us in this live stream. We do one of these live streams for our Core 2 A+ study group once a month, and you are here on our once a month study group. We also have a lot of things going on when we're not here on a live stream. You can find us on YouTube. Every single one of our courses is available. 100% of every video is available for you to watch on our YouTube channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a daily A+ pop quiz question. It's available at professormesser.com/Twitter/X/Instagram/LinkedIn and others. You can find us online by simply typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on. So that's an easy way to find out where we happen to be. Listen in at some point during the first hour of this study group. I'm going to give you instructions on how you can receive a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's a continuing education unit. So we will talk about this in just a moment so that you can, or at least in this first hour. So listen up in this first hour when that happens so that you can hear how we're going to do that, give you the instructions for how we're going to do that, and then you'll be able to submit those and receive that email. Today, we're going to talk about A+, specifically the second exam in A+, the Core 2. I guess you could take this exam first, but it is one that there are actually two different Core 2 exams available right now. There are two separate series of A+ exams that you could take as we sit here in July of 2025. The first series is the 220-1101 and the 220-1102. If you look at the CompTIA website, they're calling this version 14 for this exam series. These exams were released on April the 20th of 2022, and here's the important part. These two exams retire. They go away forever on September 25th of this year. So we're sitting here in the middle of July, August, September. I just did the math, and there's not a lot of math there to be done. We're getting very close to the retirement dates for these 2 exams. That means if you have already been studying towards these certifications, or you've already completed one of these certifications, you've got to really work to make sure that you pass the second one before September the 25th. That's your deadline, or you'll have to start all over again with the new series, and you don't want to do that. So this is, both of these exams are 90 minutes each. You should go into the exam room. Once the exam starts, you have 90 minutes to answer all of the questions, and there could be a maximum of 90 questions on the exam. The 1101, you have to score 675 on a scale from 100 to 900, and then the 1102, you have to score 700 on the same scale from 100 to 900. The exam itself consists of both multiple choice questions and performance-based questions, both of which we will do today in this live stream. You'll be familiar with that. Now, as I mentioned, this exam series goes away in September, but right now you could take either the older exams or the newer exams because both currently exist at the same time. We're in this overlap period. The newer exams are the 220-1201 and the 220-1202 on the CompTIA website. They refer to this as version 15. And these 2 exams have already been released. They were released on March the 25th. So just because they're retiring the older exams in September doesn't mean you have to wait until September to take the new exams. The new exams are already out. They've been out for months. So you can easily take those exams right now. Their estimated retirement is September of 2028. So as we sit here in July of 2025, you have plenty of time to work towards those 2 exams. The requirements for the exams are identical to the previous version 14 versions. So nothing has changed there, and nothing has changed with the format of the exam either. We can talk more about what has changed in those exams during our second hour if you have a question about that. Once you pass both of these exams, either in the previous series or in the newer series, you get your A+ certification for 3 years. So even though the exams are retiring in September for the 1101 and 1102, if you pass both of those, you are certified for 3 years. Doesn't matter how they change the questions. Since you're certified, you're good. You are locked in with all of that. Today, we're going to be talking about topics on the 1202 exam. So you're going to get questions today about operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. Really, nothing has changed with the format between the old and the new version, including all of these topics. Only thing I changed on this slide was I changed it from 1101 to 1201 and 1102 to 1202. Everything else is exactly the same. So if you do end up transitioning from one to the other, it should feel very familiar to you. So that is a bonus. We will have replay of this live stream available immediately afterwards on YouTube. You can also listen in on an audio-only version that I distribute in podcast format. If you'd like to add that to your favorite podcast listening program, you can find it on our website at professormesser.com/podcast. I also will direct you over to our YouTube page. We'll have this YouTube video available immediately afterwards. And if you wait about 24 hours, my marketing manager, Lori, will work her magic and she will add separate timestamps to everything that we do today. So you will know exactly where you will find this in the video. You can click on the timestamp. It'll take you to that spot in the video. It's a great way to find what you need and find it very, very quickly. Lori's watching the replay of this. Hi, Lori. If you are, she's also watching the chat replay. So if this is something that you have used or that you appreciate, make sure you give Lori a thanks and a hello so that she knows that other people are also enjoying the things that she is doing there. That's a great use of your time as well. It can save you quite a bit. And you can go back years to be able to do that. We also have a Discord server available. You can go to professormesser.com/Discord. There are thousands of us over on the Discord that are learning A+, Network+, Security+, and other certifications. We have a lot of smart people there that have already certified in those certifications that like helping others get started in this industry. You can find that all on our Discord. It is at professormesser.com/Discord. And eventually, you will need to take the exam. You could, of course, go out to the CompTIA website and pay full price for your exam. But if you're in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you can get your exam at a discount by going to this URL. It's professormesser.com/vouchers. This gives you the opportunity to purchase a voucher on our website. It's identical to the vouchers you would get on the CompTIA website, but these vouchers have a little discount associated with them that's already built into the price. You don't need anything extra. You don't need anything added to your browser, none of that other nonsense. You simply visit the page and it's already discounted for you. Not only do you get a discount, I'll give you something extra that you can't purchase on my site. It's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is only available if you purchase a voucher or if you purchase one of our success bundles. This is not something you can purchase separately. This contains a list of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years as I've taken these exams. And this will also give you tips that you can use during the exam to perhaps get you a few extra points. Another thing that we might be able to provide to help with your exam studies and taking the exam, find out more at professormesser.com/vouchers. And as some people are mentioning in the chat room, we have vouchers there that are one-take vouchers. There are also options available if you want to take a voucher and have a retake option associated with it. All of that is on our website at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's look at the question I posed earlier, which is, a company is looking for security controls to protect against BEC. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Is it block all non-encrypted web pages, require visible visitor badges, update the spam filter, use a third party for storage drive destruction, or encrypt all laptop drives? Let's see how you answered this one. I'm going to close the poll, and we're going to see what the results were. 49% of you, almost half of you, said to update the spam filter. 22% said block all non-encrypted web pages. 16% say require visible visitor badges. And 13% said encrypt all laptop drives. Here's an interesting one. 0% said use a third party for storage drive destruction. Wouldn't it be great if it was the 0%? In this particular case, the 49% of you that say update the spam filter are on the right track, because BEC refers to a business email compromise. So now you can see where we would fit the answers to this question into a scenario where business email has indeed been compromised. So if you're seeing any of these things show up in your inbox, like a title company telling you where you can transfer the wire transfer for certain money, maybe the CEO has emailed you to have you go out and purchase employee awards cards. That's a very popular scam. And then we have maybe the payroll department has received an email that is updating your bank account information. This may not be you sending in that bank account information, and on payday, somebody else gets your deposit. So those are the functions, the capabilities, the things we need to look for in a business email compromise. And if you look at all of the answers, the only answer that had anything to do with email was updating the spam filter. And that's why 49% of you got this one absolutely right, which, by the way, is a better response. It's a better result than the one we got last month. So I feel like we've learned something. I feel like we've grown as people, as individuals, and as smarter individuals in this case. Things like blocking all non-encrypted web pages has nothing to do with business email compromising. Requiring visible visitor badges, visible visitor. If you're a visible visitor, we will get you a visible visitor badge. If you are an invisible visitor, then we'll need to find maybe an invisible visitor badge that's not as visible. Then we also have third parties for storage drive destruction and encrypting all laptop drives. None of those also have nothing to do with email compromise. So that is the answer we were looking for, updating the spam filter. Thank you for humoring me for at least a couple of moments. At least I make myself laugh just a little bit on the inside. I won't on the replay. We won't be doing that later, but at least I think now we understand a little bit more about business email compromise and how we can focus on understanding what the right answers might be depending on what we need to protect in our organization. Let's now shift gears a bit, shall we? That last question we had was a multiple choice question because there was a question and there were multiple answers that we could choose from. But those of you that are familiar with the exam know that the first set of questions you get on the exam will not be multiple choice. They're not going to give you multiple choice questions at the beginning. They will give you anything but multiple choice. So this will be questions about in a format that might be a matching question, a fill-in-the-blank question, performing a function at the command line, a drag-and-drop question, maybe putting things in a particular order. Any way that you can ask a question, they could possibly ask this of you. So I have for you today a performance-based question for the 220-1202 exams. This performance-based question is one where you will need to find the right utility. If you were here last week, we've been doing a lot of command line functions. Last week, we did some Linux tools, so I thought it would be interesting this month to do some Windows tools. The next question, or the performance-based question that we're going to work on, is this one, where I want you to select the best Windows 11 utility for the tasks that we have listed here. So we have 4 tasks, and we have 7 Windows 11 utilities. We need to match up 1-to-1. Now, if you do the math, and I've already done it, that means 3 of these will be left over at the end. So 3 of these you're not going to use. But let's go through the 4 different tasks. They are: disable an app from starting during login. We want to list every Windows authentication failure in the last 24 hours. We may want to roll back to the previous video driver version, and we might want to run the built-in system diagnostics report. So we have 7 different utilities for this. They are Event Viewer, Resource Monitor, System Configuration, Device Manager, Performance Monitor, System Information, and Task Manager. So you have 7 different utilities to choose from. It's a 1-to-1 match, though. So again, 3 of these will be left over at the end. I've numbered these 1 through 7. All you have to do is give me the 4 that are at the top. If you think they're already in the right order, you simply need to submit 1, 2, 3, 4 at that link you see at the bottom of the screen, professormesser.com/QA. They are obviously not in that order. You will need to find the correct order for those 4 different tasks to be able to work through. Maybe this is something you're familiar with. I made this one just a little bit more difficult than it usually is. I picked some features and functions of these utilities that may not be the mainstream function of that utility. So you really have to think about these as you're going through them and how you might normally use these when you're looking at the network, when you're working with utilities, when you're in the Windows 11 desktop. See if you can find the right utility for the right piece of information. Submit that online. Go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to do that. This is also, by the way, a good test to see how well you can remember what these utilities do. There's not a lot of hands-on on the exam just because the exams don't lend themselves for that. Most of the questions you'll get on the exam will be multiple choice. So it's useful to have some hands-on work so that you can remember what's in these utilities and then be able to answer questions about them. So although this is not a hands-on question, if you had been doing some hands-on, you'd probably be able to answer this one a little bit better. So even though the exam doesn't tend to be very hands-on, it tends to expect that you've already done all the hands-on work. And trust me, doing some hands-on really shows you and teaches you things in ways that normally you would not really see. You would not be part of unless you really worked on it. There's something about typing it in at the keyboard, seeing the results. It gets embedded into your brain in a different way than simply passively watching someone perform the same features. So I absolutely encourage you to be able to do a lot of hands-on. It will help you quite a bit. By the way, there were questions on the chat room earlier about this. Everything that we're doing today is for the 220-1202 exam, the Core 2 exam that is the newest version 15 that was released in March. So this is one that, this particular question, however, is also applicable to the 1102 exam. So whether you're studying for the older version of the exam or the newer version of the exam, exactly the same information in this question. So this is a good question that overlaps between both of those. Might help you a little bit in being able to do this. Let's now have a look at what you answered. Well, I can see what you answered, but you can't because it's not a multiple choice. But let's go through how I answered it and see if it matches what you answered. Let's start with the very first task, which is disable an app from starting during login. The important part about this question, or one of the important parts about this question, is that we are choosing the best Windows 11 utility for the task. And in Windows 11, if you want to individually enable or disable a particular application from starting when you logged in, you would go to Task Manager. Task Manager is where you would go to provide in the Startup tab the option for enabling or disabling certain applications from starting, which is a great troubleshooting tool, by the way. If you're running into a problem and you don't know if the problem is related to the operating system or if it's related to an application during startup, you can temporarily disable all of the applications during startup by going into Task Manager in the Startup tab. Next on our list is list every Windows authentication failure in the last 24 hours. If you are someone who is doing some type of security analysis of a system, maybe you are checking authentication failures to see if maybe this is something important you should be paying attention to, you need to know what application is going to show you those things. And the application that provides that is the Event Viewer. Event Viewer shows us an event, all of the events about everything that happens in Windows, whether it's something you see on the screen or something that happens behind the scenes. And if someone is trying to log into your system and the authentication is failing every time they do that, you'll be able to see it in the Event Viewer. Of course, you'll also be able to see any authentication successes in the Event Viewer as well. The Event Viewer has everything inside of it. If you get really good at filtering out information in the Event Viewer, you'll be able to find information very, very, very quickly and be able to solve problems faster. So it's a great tool to be able to do that. So certainly something to consider. Next on our list is roll back to the previous video driver version. I have done this before for sure. You might install a driver and then realize, I don't like a feature of the new driver, or maybe there is a bug in the driver and we want to go back to a previous version of the driver that we were using. We would roll back to that inside of the Device Manager inside of Windows. Device Manager is a very useful tool to know if certain pieces of hardware are working properly, if during startup there were any issues. And they give you an option inside this not only to enable or disable a driver, but to revert to a previous version of the driver. So this can be very, very useful. This is a bacon saving feature of the operating system, so that if something isn't going right, we can simply rewind back to a previous driver version. Can help quite a bit. And then our last task is to run the built-in system diagnostics report. This is slightly esoteric, but it is mentioned in the course, and it is a really nice feature to be able to run inside of the utility of Windows 11 Performance Monitor. Performance Monitor has a number of built-in reports, and you only need to right mouse click and say run that report, and it will go through the process of building a system diagnostics based on CPU, memory, and other information. And it will tell you this system failed this particular part of this because it's this version of a CPU, or it failed this particular section because it has, and you don't have enough memory. There's a lot of other things. But Performance Monitor has all of those reports built into it, and reports that you can build for yourself. So the three different utilities we did not use is Resource Monitor. You can think of Resource Monitor as being a higher end task manager. It really drills down into CPU and memory and disk access, and really being able to understand what's happening at a detailed level. So if you're looking for a bit more detail, a bit more precise information, that's a really useful one, maybe to use instead of Task Manager. The other utility that we did not choose here would be System Configuration. In previous versions of Windows, for example, you could go into the System Configuration option and disable the apps from starting during login. Now you cannot. Now that is built into the Task Manager itself, which is probably where it should be. So that's always a good thing to have there. And then the last utility we did not choose is system information. This is a relatively passive application that simply tells us information. We don't really interact with this app very much, but it tells us a lot of information about our system. For example, if you wanted to know what BIOS was running on your system and what version of that BIOS, you could, of course, reboot your whole machine just to be able to get into the BIOS to view that, or you can simply run system information, and that will tell you in the system information screen. So that can save you a lot of time as well. Great utility, especially if you're sitting down to a machine that you've never used before. System information can show you a lot of detail about what's inside the system. How is it configured? How much memory does it have? What type of drivers does it have set up? A lot of information inside of there. So those are the 4 utilities we were looking for. Task Manager allows you to disable an app from starting during login. Event Viewer will list every Windows authentication failure in the last 24 hours. Device Manager allows you to roll back to a previous driver version. And then Performance Monitor has some built-in reports where you could run the built-in system diagnostics report if you would like. So that was our performance-based question of the month. You'll notice that this was a matching question, but this is effectively the same as maybe multiple choice questions, many multiple choice questions built into one. So if you start thinking about it that way, you realize it's really just a different way to ask us about the information that we already know, coming directly from the exam objectives. So when you look at performance-based questions that way, really doesn't matter how they ask the question. If you know the content, you'll be able to answer every single one of them. Let's shift gears back to a multiple choice question, since the bulk of your exam will be multiple choice. And this multiple choice question asks, a help desk ticket shows a Windows error, quote, the controller does not have enough resources for this device, end quote. Which of the following would be the best way to address this issue? Would it be restart the computer, disable all unsigned device drivers, upgrade to the latest Windows version, upgrade the RAM, or try a different USB interface? You have 5 options to choose from. If you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your question. The question again asks, a help desk ticket shows a Windows error, quote, the controller does not have enough resources for this device, end quote. Which of the following would be the best way to address this issue? Do we restart the computer, disable all unsigned device drivers, upgrade to the latest Windows version, upgrade the RAM, or try a different USB interface? Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please don't answer chat room. We just say it over and over and over and over again. Does it even make sense anymore? Yes, it does. I'm afraid it does. Over and over. I just wake up in the middle of the night. Don't answer the chat room. Don't put any hints in the chat. It's not quite that bad. It's not that horrible when you're working through it. We have to be able to figure out how we can manage the chat and manage the questions. So far, chat room, you've done a phenomenal job. You've been fantastic. Thank you. Really no problems there. Just the best group. Thank you so much for following along with this. Let's see how you did with this question. It asks, a help desk ticket shows a Windows error. Quote, the controller does not have enough resources for this device. Which of the following would be the best way to address this issue? Do we restart the computer, disable all unsigned device drivers, upgrade to the latest Windows version, upgrade the RAM, or try a different USB interface? Let's close the poll and find out. And, oh, we're a little torn. 41% of you say you try a different USB interface, but 37% of you said you upgrade the RAM. That's the resource you're really have a problem with. 12%, though, said disable all unsigned device drivers, which may or may not be good advice. We can talk about that. 9% of you gave really the best answer, which is it's not the right answer, but it's the best answer. Just restart the computer. But in this particular case, restarting the computer doesn't fix this problem. What? I thought it fixed every problem. It does not. This is a really good example. And then 1% say to upgrade to the latest Windows version. Maybe you're on the latest Windows version. It's not going to help you very much. Maybe you wait for the next Windows version. That's what the answer is. That's not the right answer. Only 1% of you chose that. In this particular case, the answer that we were looking for was the 41% of you that said try a different USB interface. What? Shouldn't we just restart the computer? Not quite yet. And that's because the problem that we are seeing here, this error that is showing up, is this one right here that says, right there, the controller does not have enough resources for this device. And that is a screenshot of the error. This is not a faked out message on the screen. This is a real message from a real version of Windows that says the controller does not have enough resources for this device. And the recommendation is try connecting your device to a different port on your PC or disconnect a device you are not using. Your PC manufacturer can provide more information. And it should say ha ha at the end of that, because I'm not really sure your PC manufacturer really can. But there is information you can get from your PC manufacturer that can help you understand where this problem is coming from. This is a USB problem. And this error, when it says it doesn't have enough resources, this is referring to what in the USB world is called endpoints. USB endpoints. Every time you plug in a device on a USB interface, there are a number of endpoints that are being referenced for this, that are being used by that device. So your mouse might have 6 USB endpoints that it will use. A video capture device might have 20 USB endpoints that are used when you plug in that USB device. And a controller can only support a certain number of endpoints. One thing that we start to see, though, is as you have higher versions of USB standards that are supported, these controllers tend to support larger numbers of endpoints. So USB 2.0 might have a fewer number of available endpoints than a USB 3.0 controller, for example. So you've got some options here when you're working with USB. If you've run out of resources, you can't make more endpoints. That's built into the hardware of your device. So the answer that Windows gave was actually pretty good. You could unplug something you're not using. That will take those endpoints out of the equation. You could use them for something else. Or you may want to try just a different USB interface on your computer that might be connected to a different controller. Now, if you're like me, you're really fastidious about this. You go into the operating system, you look at the controller, you find out where these physical interfaces are, and you figure out on the outside of your computer what USB interfaces are connected to what controller so that you can figure that piece out when you're working with it. A little bit of overkill, but I sort of work that way with my computer systems. So that might be something that would help. This is why, by the way, that rebooting your computer is not going to help you, because your USB devices will still be plugged in once you reboot the computer, and they will still be using those endpoints. So you're not freeing up any resources by restarting your computer. At least you won't be freeing up any USB interface resources by restarting your computer. That's why a restart is not going to be the right answer here. That's why 9% of you that said restart your computer, a beautiful idea. I love the idea, but it's not going to help you. 37% of you said upgrade the RAM. Now, in this particular case, the Windows error referring to the controller, referring to resources, like every Windows error, it is giving you the bare minimum of information that you need to know, which doesn't help you very much. It would be nice if they said the USB controller does not have enough endpoints for this device. It would be nice if they spelled it out. But in a hope to keep you in the dark, in an effort to make your job even better, even more secure, they've made it very vague so that only you know the secret. You are the administrator. You're the only one who really knows how to fix this problem. And being able to upgrade the RAM is not going to help you. This is not a memory resource problem. This is a USB endpoint resource problem. And that is the one that we really have to focus on. The other option we had here was to upgrade to the latest Windows version. Since this is a hardware resource that we are using, upgrading, changing, or modifying the operating system is not going to upgrade, change, or modify the number of USB resources available. Therefore, the best answer for this particular question, and the only one that really applies, is the one right there at the bottom, Just try a different USB interface. It might be connected to a different USB controller and therefore have more available endpoints so that you will not have to deal with this. So this is what you would use. The question in the chat room says, so when would a USB device not have an endpoint? All USB devices have at least one endpoint that they're using, in many cases more than one. So even though you may not have heard of it, that's why it's on this exam, so that you have now heard of it. You can't say that anymore. Now you have heard of this, so now you can troubleshoot it. And that's an important one. This particular error is specifically written in the CompTIA official exam objectives document. That's why this particular error is on the screen, and that's why you should know all about USB endpoints, controllers, and where to plug in. So hopefully, if you want to know more about this, and it sounds like a lot of you do, head over to my 220-1202 training course. It's section 3.1, and the video you would like to watch on this topic is called Troubleshooting Windows. I go a lot more into endpoints, where those come from, why we're talking about them, and what we can do about those. Let's do another question, shall we? Let's shift over to another multiple choice question. This one is a question that asks, oh, by the way, the one about endpoints we just did applies whether you're on the 1102 or the 1202 exam. So this one applies across both. This question is one that asks, a technician is accessing a CMDB. Which of the following is most likely associated with this task? I believe this is a 1202 question. I don't believe this is a 1102 question. So this is for the newer exam. A technician is accessing a CMDB. Which of the following is most likely associated with this task? Is it reset a user's domain credentials, run a test app in a sandbox, automate a patch distribution, restart a web server, or find the serial number of a user's laptop? One of those is going to be the answer we were looking for. If you think you know what it is, please go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. I said that very aggressively for some reason. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints on the chat room. I don't know why I'm saying it again. You're not putting any answers in the chat room, and you're not putting any hints into the chat room. Thank you so much for not doing that. Instead, follow the link on your screen. See if you know this one. CMDB. This one, again, revolves around your knowledge of an acronym. So you have to know the acronym, and then once you know the acronym, you have to know how that acronym applies into the answers that are available on your screen. So it's not a one-to-one. You don't really get a lot of questions on the exam that say, what do the letters CMDB stand for? You're not going to get a question like that on your exam. They will instead use the acronym and expect that you already know all about how this acronym is used with the technology. And it usually has a reference to it. So this is like most of the questions on the exam. They are definitely a set of questions that you go through multiple steps to get to the final answer of these in most cases. I think that's something you do have to become more familiar with as you work through it. Let's see how you did with this one. A technician is accessing a CMDB. Which of the following is most likely associated with this task? Is it reset a user's domain credentials, run a test app in a sandbox, automate a patch distribution, restart a web server, or find the serial number of a user's laptop? Let's stop our poll. We'll close it out and see how we do. Well, we're a little bit torn. We did not get a majority, but 42% of you say this is what you would use to find the serial number of a user's laptop. 35% of you, more than a third, say reset a user's domain credentials. 10% said to automate a patch distribution. And then we go to single digits, a tie for last place. 7% said run a test app in a sandbox, and 7% said restart a web server. Well, if we go with the plurality of you, it would be to find the serial number of a user's laptop, and that indeed is the correct answer. That's the one we were looking for. Find the serial number of a user's laptop. Why would we want to know the serial number of a user's laptop? Well, if we are in a CMDB, that is a configuration management database, then that's what is inside of that database. That's some of the information that we have there. So you can find out of all of your users, what devices have they been assigned? What's the serial number of those devices? What is the hardware configuration of those devices? What is the warranty associated with that device? You've got a lot of different options. You could look up information on how much you paid for that device. You can summarize all of your payments for device over a certain time frame. You could list out every device on your network that is losing its warranty status over the next 3 months. So you might want to think about purchasing new equipment. There's a lot you can do with these databases. Everything that you want to know is inside that database. So it becomes a very, very valuable piece of information. Allows you to keep track of where all of this hardware might be. When you reassign equipment to other people, you change the database so you now know. And when someone calls into the help desk and they say, hi, here's my name, here's my employee number, I'm having a problem with my laptop. You can click, 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 and the configuration management database will tell you, oh, that person has a Dell laptop. Here's the model. Here's the configuration. Here's how much memory it has. Here's how much storage space it has. So you know a lot about that system, even though you haven't even asked any questions yet. You haven't even remotely connected to that device. You know all about this device because you were able to reference it in the configuration management database, the CMDB. And that's why finding the serial number of a user's laptop is indeed the answer that we were looking for, because that is one of the things that exists inside of that database. 35% of you said to reset a user's domain credentials. Well, now you know that this is a configuration management database. It has no administrative functionality whatsoever, so you would not be able to reset a user's domain credentials from that configuration management database. We also have 10% that said automate a patch distribution. Patches are not distributed from a CMDB, so we would not use it for that. We have other utilities that allow us that. Although today, if you're doing that with Microsoft, you probably ran into a few problems today. That's all in the news. You'll have to check that on your system. This will already be out of date by the time you see this on a replay. Running a test app in a sandbox is not done in a configuration management database. It's usually done in some type of hypervisor or virtualized system. And then restarting a web server is done through centralized web server management software, not a configuration management database. The right answer is the one 42% of you chose, which is to find the serial number of a user's laptop. That is exactly what you would choose for this particular question. Well done. Well, you can tell already there's a lot of information on the Core 2 exam. And when you combine that with the information that's on the Core 1 exam, there's a lot of things we need to remember for this A+ certification. If you were to look at my entire course, it's 137 videos over 19 hours of content. And my courses are designed to give you exactly what you need to pass this exam. I go through every single exam objective. I don't give you a lot of fluff, and I don't go outside the scope of that because you're trying to pass this very specific certification exam. So even 19 hours is a lot for just the exam objectives. The exam objectives cover so many different topics: hardware, networking, security, mobile devices, troubleshooting. You've got cloud technologies on there. There's just a lot that we have to memorize and keep in mind. Now, of course, I recommend you go through every video, but you may find that the videos themselves, you might skip some. Maybe you don't have time to go through all of them, or maybe you'd like to take notes, but you're not a great note taker. Well, that's okay. I've already taken notes for you. These are my course notes that I have available for the 1201 and the 1202 exam, as well as the older exams. If you're still taking the older exams, we have that available there as well. You've got options for that. We also have other things in this. You have all the text, all the important tables are in these course notes. All the important graphics are included with these course notes. Everything that you need to be able to understand, remember, and reference the information that was in those videos is contained within the course notes. The version you just saw is the digital PDF version. You can purchase that version, download it, and have it available on your machine before this live event is even over with. And of course, I have physical versions as well. If you wanted one that was printed out, when you purchase the physical edition, you get the digital edition at no additional cost. So while you're waiting on this to be printed and shipped out to you, you can get that downloadable version. It's a PDF file, and you can load it up on anything that will view a PDF and be able to reference your notes. And if you get along with the 1201 and 1202 at the same time, you can save a little bit of money. There's a bit of a discount there associated with it. So that might be something you might want to consider. If you want to know more about that and you want to know how you can, of course, support the things that we do here at Messer Studios, you can find that at professormesser.com/1202notes. Well, that is a great way to support what we're doing. Another great way is to watch our videos and participate in this live stream. So let's do our next question, which is, which of the following would be the most likely use of REFS? Would it be a Windows database server, a Mac OS laptop, an iOS phone, a USB flash drive, or an Android tablet? Which of the following would be the most likely use of REFS? Would it be a Windows database server, a Mac OS laptop, an iOS phone, a USB flash drive, or an Android tablet? If you think you know the answer, go to the link right there. Go to professormesser.com/QA. A lot of people lock in their answer in quickly on this one. I'm having a good feeling about it. I think we might do really, really well on this one. So choose carefully. Pay close attention to the question. Pay close attention to the answers. See if you can narrow down where this would be. This is a 1202 question. This is not on the 1100 series exam. So this is one you do need to keep in mind if you're going to take the newer version of the exam. This is a 1202 live stream. So all the questions in here will certainly and of course apply to the 220 1202 exam. There is a lot of overlap between these exams. And if you want to see the overlap, I can visually show you some of that in the after show. By the way, speaking of which, you can submit questions for the after show at any time by visiting that same link, professormesser.com/QA. There's a tab across the top. You can click over and submit questions, and I will look through your questions in the second hour. So feel free to submit some of those in that second hour. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be the most likely use of REFS? Is it a Windows database server, a Mac OS laptop, an iOS phone, a USB flash drive, or an Android tablet? Let's close the poll and see how you did. We did pretty good on this one. We jump back in. 59% of you say the answer is a Windows database server, but we have a lot of double digits on this one. A USB flash drive got 13%. 11% of you said an Android tablet. 10% of you said a Mac OS tablet, and only one of the answers has a single digit. 7% of you said an iOS phone is the one with REFS. REFS stands for the Resilient File System. This is an upgrade or update, if you want to think of it this way, to NTFS. NTFS has been around forever with Windows. It is the predominant file system for Windows devices. Most of the Windows devices that you're going to use will probably be using NTFS. And I would expect probably very few, if any, of the Windows devices that you are using will be using REFS, the Resilient File System. This is a relatively new file system. It supports a number of great features, but because it is so new, it is not something that Microsoft is actively forcing people to upgrade to or even encouraging them in many ways to upgrade to this. You can have very, very large drives and storage arrays in this particular version. There is additional data checks. So if you've ever sat through a check disk and had it go through the entire drive, what if the file system just kept track of that on its own and corrected any problems in real time instead of us having to do it afterwards? What a great idea. We'll put it in REFS. There's also some RAID type redundancy. It's not RAID, but it's RAID-like. It's RAID-ish. It's a radish on the Resilient File System that does RAID-like things, which is kind of a nice feature built into the file system. And it has things that have integration capabilities with the Windows operating system. So REFS is going to be someday probably the predominant file system for Windows. It's just not baked all the way through quite yet. They do have it available to install if you would like to try it out. So that might be something you might want to use on your Windows system. It's in Server 2012 and later. It has very limited support on the desktop version of Windows. However, you probably want to set up a server to be able to try out and see if REFS will be something you'll even want to use. Let's have a look at those answers that you gave. Obviously, the Windows database server, since this is a Windows type of function, that is the answer that we were looking for. 13% said a USB flash drive. USB flash drives would most commonly use exFAT to be able to have a file system on that platform. exFAT is a file system that it can be read and used by many different operating systems, so it's perfect for flash drives. macOS laptop might use an AFS, the Apple file system, but probably it obviously would not be using REFS because that is exclusive and proprietary to Microsoft. Same thing applies for the iOS phone and the Android tablets, which usually will run their own types of file systems, an EXT type file system for Android. An iOS phone will probably, I think it's using AFS, isn't it? It's using the Apple file system. I don't go into the file system of iOS, so I haven't looked at it lately. And of course, the different operating systems tend to have file systems that they focus on and rely on. You don't have to run those file systems in that particular operating system, but in many cases, it makes a lot of sense to use the one that the operating system uses the most. This is your data that you're storing on these devices after all. That is the most likely use of REFS in this big list is the Windows database server. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Let's fit in another question, shall we? This next question for you Linux people asks, a Linux administrator, I guess if I click that, you'd be able to see it. There we go. Here's the actual question. A Linux administrator needs to free some disk space to install a new application. Which of the following would the administrator likely use? Would it be grep, ps, rm, yum, or cat? It sounds like I might have slipped something into a drink somewhere. A Linux administrator needs to free some disk space to install a new application. Which of the following would the administrator likely use? Is it grep, ps, rm, yum, or cat? See if you know the answer. You can see the link on your screen. You know the one. You've heard it before. ProfessorMesser.com/QA. I'll say it different. ProfessorMesser.com/QA. Now it sounds like a completely different link. I'll change the emphasis just a bit to be able to have that. So you Linux folks, all of these are Linux commands. And folks that are not Linux people, all of these things are Linux commands. Those weird things I said, grep, ps, rm, yum, and cat, make perfect sense to somebody who is a Linux person and makes no sense to anyone who is not. And that's pretty much Linux in a nutshell. I think that's pretty much how it works. I am someone who administers quite a number of Linux systems, so I am familiar with the craziness and the chaos associated with Linux. I keep saying someday we're going to prove that Linux actually works, even though we're using it everywhere for everything. Linux seems to be everywhere we look. So it's important, especially if you're working with those systems, and every company has some Linux systems, we might want to free some disk space to install a new application. How are we going to do that? What is the thing that we will choose to do that? A lot of you have locked in your answer. Let's see if you got the answer right. A Linux administrator needs to free some disk space to install a new application. Which of the following would the administrator likely use? Would they use grep? Would they use ps? Would they use rm? Would they use yum? Would they use cat? The cat. And the answers that you gave me, 67% of you say the answer would be rm. RM is what you would use. We have 11% of you that say yum is the answer that you would use. And then we go to single digits. 9% said grep, 8% said cat, 5% said ps. Cat is a real command, I promise you. You have to know all of the pieces of that, so that can help you as well. In this case, we're trying to free up some drive space. Or I should say, this is what I'm doing every time I want to install a new application. I look at how much drive space I have, and there's not enough. So I need to free some drive space up just a little bit. So in this particular case, the answer that we would use to free up that space is indeed RM. We are removing some things to be able to do that and freeing up some drive space to install a new application. Now, some of you are mentioning that there are other commands you could use here that could potentially remove or free up some space on the drive. That wasn't the question, though, was it? The question was, which of the following would the administrator likely use? And for example, you could use yum not just to only install applications. You can uninstall applications with yum. But why would you uninstall an application from your system just to free up drive space? Why wouldn't you delete something you don't need first? And that's why we're looking at what is most likely used. This is, by the way, a very common thing on the exam, is that there may be multiple questions here that will have you think that, well, I could use this to do that function. I could use this. I could use 3 or 4 of these answers to perform that function. But that wasn't the question. The questions are the one you would most likely use. So even though there may be some other interesting or esoteric use of a particular application or utility, the one that removes information from your system to free some disk space, RM is the one that really makes sense. This is the one we would also focus on. So this is a good use of it. You can remove these. This is an example of me on the system listing out all of the documents. You can see there's a document here called second.txt. And then I use the command rm second.txt. And then I list out all of the files again. Notice it's gone now. So that simple rm command has removed it. It has freed up that drive space. And now I can use that drive space for something else. The rm command is the one we were looking for. That is the right answer. If you want to know more about that and any of these commands that I listed here, you should go over to my video on the 220.12.02 section 1.9 to Linux commands part 1. Yes, there are 2 parts to this one. There are a lot of Linux commands, and I demonstrate every single one of them so you can see how they work at the command prompt. And you can even follow along at the command prompt yourself to try out some of these commands on your own machine. That might be something worthwhile for you. Let's do another one. We've got time. We're getting close to the top of the hour, but we're not there yet. So let's get another question in the mix. This question asks, a company would like to block all file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be SSO, IAM, DLP, SAML, PAM? Again, I sound like a crazy person. A company would like to block all file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Is it SSO, IAM, DLP, SAML, or PAM? It's got to be one of these, right? If you think you know the answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA to find out when or where this particular answer might lie in your decision-making process. Let's see if you know which one of these it is. Lock it in. There's a lot of great abbreviations here. All of these acronyms, by the way, are in your exam objectives. If you're studying for the 220.12.02 exam, you have to know all 5 of those. So you should rattle them off right now. SSO stands for, IAM stands for, DLP stands for. You should go through the whole list to figure out the details of this. This might be very useful. This might also be one where we need to understand not just what the acronym stands for, what those letters stand for. It's even more important that we understand how to use that technology. In the actual use of these technologies in the world, we hardly ever call them by their full name. We're constantly using these acronyms in everything that we do. We'll put them in an email. We'll talk in person. Hey, did you look at the SSO? Did you handle that DLP issue? Did you have the PAM problem I mentioned earlier? That's just how we talk about these. So you have to know where those fit into the big mix of things. Let's see how well you did with this one. A company would like to block all file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be SSO, IAM, DLP, SAML, or PAM? And what did you choose? Let's find out, everybody. Let's see. We got 49% of you that say the answer is DLP. So if we were going with the plurality of you, that's what it would be. We didn't quite get a majority. 22% said SAML, 14% said SSO, 8% said IAM, and then you had 6% that said PAM. Well, this is a pretty good thing to do, of course. Somebody's sending credit card information out across the network and it's not encrypted, then it's probably a pretty good idea that we block that before it reaches wherever it is going, since anyone would be able to capture these packets and be able to see all of that important credit card information within the document. To be able to do that, we would use a function that might be a standalone device, or it might be software contained within the servers that we're using. And we refer to all of these solutions as data loss prevention, or DLP. Data loss prevention looks for sensitive information, whatever that happens to be. It might be a social security number. It might be a credit card number. It might be medical information. It could be anything that we feel is too sensitive to send in an unprotected form. So what DLP will do is look for that data to be stored in a file, to be transmitted across the network, to somehow be moving around your network in an unencrypted form, and it will stop it. Whether it's something integrated into an endpoint, whether it's a standalone device, maybe it's integrated into your next generation firewall. You can do DLP in multiple places, and you might even implement it in multiple places on your network just to cover everything. Data loss prevention is the answer that we were looking for. That's the one that will block that sensitive information so that you don't have to worry about where that is going and have someone else get their hands on that. DLP is the solution we were looking for. There are a lot of other options. If you were to look at your systems and break down where you would focus with these technologies, some of the others that we have on our list, if you're doing authentication, you'll probably be using SAML. The SAML configurations that I've worked with for the security assurance markup language are things where you are logging in with the username and password and then using that to access an application. That, of course, has nothing to do with blocking file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. 14% of you said single sign-on is what would block that. Single sign-on is a great way to authenticate to the network so that you don't have to keep typing in your username and your password constantly every time you connect to another resource on your network. You put it in one time at the beginning of the day, and that single sign-on is able to provide you access to the resources that you would normally have access to. We also have other options on our list, things like the identity and access management with IAM. That is a function that is extremely important to make sure that people have access to only the things they should be accessing. And then 6% of you said PAM. This is not referring to a person. This is referring to more authentication. This is the privileged access management. And if you're somebody who is working with authentication, keeping things secure, then you'll probably be working with SSO, IAM, SAML, and PAM, but you will not be working with DLP because DLP would be for blocking sensitive information from being transferred, from being sent out over the network, or from simply just being used on the network. So you have different options depending on what you're doing, but those are the ones that we're concerned about. And for this question, the answer is indeed DLP, the data loss prevention. If you want to know more about that, you can go to my video section 2.1 under authentication and access. Let's do a troubleshooting question, shall we? I know it's past the top of the hour. We're going to squeeze in one more. Okay. I think that's okay, right? Here is our troubleshooting question. It asks, after updating a mobile phone OS, one of the apps shows a splash screen during startup and then disappears. Which of the following would be the most likely fix for this issue? Would it be to remove the phone from the MDM, run an anti-malware utility, disable Bluetooth, update the app, or connect to a different wireless network? Let's see what you would choose to be able to fix this problem. The question again asks, after updating a mobile phone OS, one of the apps shows a splash screen during startup and then disappears. Which of the following would be the most likely fix for this issue? Would it be to remove the phone from the MDM, run an anti-malware utility, disable Bluetooth, update the app, or connect to a different wireless network? If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would like to send you an email that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. You can do that by visiting the Professor Messer website. And at the top or bottom of the webpage, you can click the Contact Us button. In that Contact Us button, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put July 2025 Core 2. In the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month, which are mobile phone splash screen. Mobile phone splash screen are the super secret code words of the month. Click OK to send me that information. In about a week, I'll reply back to you with a digitally signed email that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar. That's a 1-hour webinar category CEU. So again, if you want to do that, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put July 2025 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put mobile phone splash screen. For this question, let's see how you did. The question again asks, after updating a mobile phone OS, one of the apps shows a splash screen during startup and then disappears. Which of the following would be the most likely fix for this issue? Would it be to remove the phone from the MDM, run an anti-malware utility, disable Bluetooth, update the app, or connect to a different wireless network? 72% of you said just update the app is what you should do. We got 21% though that said, oh, not so quick. Run an anti-malware utility. Maybe you've got malware on that system. 4% said remove the phone from the MDM. Didn't say that we were on an MDM, but I guess that's an option. 1% of you said disable Bluetooth, and 1% of you said to connect to a different wireless network. Not too big of a surprise that the 72% of you that said update the app is the answer that we were looking for. And that's because applications are often made to work on a particular operating system version. And if that operating system version changes, it's very possible that there's a feature of that app is no longer working properly. So if you updated the operating system, you should also make sure that you're updating the application so that you're able to make sure that all of the features are there. It's not crashing or failing on you. It's not using too much battery or too much storage. Just update the app, get the latest version, and you're probably going to be fine. And given the options that were available in this question, that was really the only one that would provide us with any reasonable fix for this. The running an anti-malware utility would probably not most likely fix this issue because nothing in this question said anything that showed us that a malware might be on the system. We didn't get a weird pop-up. There wasn't an unusual message. We had not accidentally or on purpose installed some other application. There was nothing here that had been done other than updating the mobile phone operating system, which is a very low chance of getting malware through something like that. We don't really have cases where we're getting malware on our system just by updating the operating system of the smartphone. So updating the app would be the natural answer for something like that. Running anti-malware utility would just be a waste of time because there's nothing that we've done in this question that has anything that would point us into installing malware. And that's an important consideration, by the way, on your exam. Don't make up some convoluted backstory about things that might have happened prior to this question being written. Well, what if prior to upgrading the operating system, they went out to a third-party website and installed a bunch of other things? Maybe they did. That wasn't in the question. That's a completely different story that you made up about something else in your mind that maybe even an example of something that happened to you. But that wasn't the question. So don't add information into the question that's not specifically written there. Every question is its own little world. Every question is giving you exactly the information you need to answer the question. There's no vague pieces in here. You don't have to fill in any blanks. You don't have to read between the lines. It's telling you everything that is in this question and everything you need to know to answer this question. And that's why running an anti-malware utility would not be what we were looking for. Could this system have malware? I guess it could, but nothing in this question was really pointing us to that. So therefore, it would not be the most likely fix for this issue. 4% said remove the phone from the MDM. As I've already mentioned, we never said it was in an MDM, but even if it was, it's unlikely restrictions in the MDM would have caused the application to simply fail. Normally, when the MDM doesn't allow you to do something, it tells you, you're not allowed to do this. If you have questions, please contact the help desk. So you get something that's more specific if it's an MDM, a mobile device manager type issue. 1% said disable Bluetooth. There's nothing in this question that is saying that it's not working because Bluetooth is not working properly. So that's not the issue we were looking at. And connecting to a different wireless network could potentially be one of the answers. I like that answer. I think the 1% of you that chose that answer, there's a bit of truth there, isn't there? What if you're on a network that is restricting access to something this app needs to check in with when it starts, and since it can't check in, it closes the app out without an error? Bad application, but it's something that could potentially be happening. But that's a pretty unusual scenario I just made up in my mind about, but what if it did this and then it had to do that? And then we had to be facing a certain direction. And then it was a certain time of the year. And is the moon a full moon? Is it a waxing gibbous? What is going on? Instead of having all these different scenarios, go back to the question. We updated the mobile phone and now an app won't start. That's it. That's the only two things we need to worry about. So which question makes sense from that point? It's the one 72% of you chose. To update the app, that's what we wanted to do. That is the right answer. That is the one that gives you the result here. And probably updating the app will update it for the newer operating system, and it will suddenly begin working properly again, and the sky will be blue and the birds will be singing, and you can close the ticket, and then you're off to the next one. That is the answer for that one. All of the questions we did today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I can't stress how important this single free document is. This is an extremely important document to have because it tells you everything that will appear on the exam. I mean everything. It is very specific. Here's my copy of the exam objectives. It gives you a bulleted breakdown of everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. CompTIA sticks to this list practically 100% of the exam, which means that if you know every one of these bullets, you're going to pass. That's it. That's how simple this is. Now, some people will tell you, and people have told me, I get emails all the time, and they talk to me about this information because they'll point me to this first page of the exam objectives where it says, please note the lists of examples provided in bulleted format are not exhaustive lists, Professor Messer. Other examples of technologies, processes, or tasks pertaining to each objective may also be included on the exam, although not listed or covered in this objectives document. That is the clause that other people will use to go way off script, to start studying things that aren't listed anywhere in this list of objective. And the thing that I will point you to is this word may. What this means is we might give you a question about something else, but in actuality, we're not going to. This is lawyer talk for we're leaving ourselves the option so that nobody can complain later that we put something on the exam that wasn't explicitly stated in these objectives. But the reality is these objectives are very, very close. 99% of these objectives, if not 100% of these objectives, are going to be on your exam. They are on the CompTIA website associated with the certification that you're planning to take. So go to the 220-1202 section of the CompTIA website, and there will be a list across the top for downloading the exam objectives. Or you can go to my link, professormesser.com/objectives, which at this point just simply takes you over to the CompTIA website. They restructured their entire website, and every set of objectives is on a different page. But now you can just download it. They don't ask you a lot of detailed information. You don't have to give them a name and an email address and all of those things anymore. You just go out to the CompTIA website and it's a free download, no questions asked. What could be better than that when you're talking about a set of exam objectives? And this should be the first thing you grab before you start your studies. This is also, by the way, a great checklist before you sign up for your exam, just to see if you're ready to take your exam. So if you're looking for a barometer, if you're looking for a sounding board, if you're looking for a sanity check, this is it. ProfessorMesser.com/objectives, or simply type in CompTIA exam objectives and the name of the exam, and you can find it in your favorite search engine. We do one of these live streams every month. This live stream is the one that we did for July. We've already got one arranged for August. I think I might be moving some of these dates around for August, though. I've already been informed of this earlier today. Haven't been locked in yet, but currently August 5th and August 7th are going to be our next A+ study groups. We've also got a Network Plus study group planned for July. It's next week, and a Security Plus study group the week after that. But if you want to see the August dates, they're here on the screen. As I mentioned, I might change some of these around. So if you're wondering when is the next live event going to be, I always update this link immediately the moment I know. So you can go to professormesser.com/calendar and it will tell you what the latest is. And if I change something, that's the first place I change it. I change it here and I change it in the events channel on our Discord, both of those at the same time. So if you're looking in either one of those places, you are looking at the most recent information. And you can find that at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, we're done with the first hour, but stick around for the after show. I'm going to answer your questions in just a moment. You can submit those questions at any time from professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our course notes. We are also going to have practice exams coming very soon. You might want to check those out at professormesser.com/1202success. We've also got, don't forget, our discounted vouchers are detailed at professormesser.com/vouchers. Those all come with an exam hacks ebook for free. You just get it as a bonus. Can't buy it, can't get it anywhere else. Only get it when you're purchasing a voucher or a success bundle. And of course, if you want to find us online, simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us, /Discord, /X, /Twitter, /YouTube, /LinkedIn, /Facebook, whatever that happens to be, you will find us there. It's a great place to go. Stick around. After show is coming up in just a couple of seconds. We've got a lot more questions to go through. This time, questions that you ask of me. It's on the after show coming up next. Thank you for joining us in this first half. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Okay, let's take a sip. See if we can get our throat to stay with us in this second half. Let me bring up pictures and other things on the screen here. If we click that button and then we click this button, there we are. I knew I was around here somewhere. Now we can talk all about the after show. The after show is where I ask questions of you in this first hour. This is where you can ask questions of me. You can submit these questions for the after show at any time. I will be moderating these during the session, so I will see them on my side. So you won't see the question just pop up on the screen for obvious reasons. I will be looking through the questions on my side, making sure they look or sound normal, and then putting them on the screen. Most of you do a great job at doing that, by the way. Thank you for doing that. You can put those questions up by visiting that link, professormesser.com/QA, to submit your questions. Be able to have that there. So we've been talking in this first hour about all of these questions relating to the Core 1 exam, the Core 2 exam, and of course, the study group that we've been doing so far has been focused on the 1200 series exams. Those are the latest versions of the exams. But of course, right now, until September 25th, you could take the 1100 series exams, or you could take the 1200 series exams. You have the choice. So the question that we have from Daniel asks, what's the difference between the 1101 and 1201 and the 1102 and 1202? And which one should we take if we were just starting out to study? So the second question is actually easier to answer than the first one, because the 1100 series exams retire on September 25th. It's now July the 10th. So you have less than 3 months to be able to pass both exams by that time. And if you don't pass both exams, you have to start over with the 1200 series. That doesn't make sense. If you're just starting your studies, the 1200 series has been out since March. You can study the 1200 series material and you'll have all of that available to you to be able to look through those. Now, also on my side, if you are really interested, you could, of course, go out to professormesser.com. You could go to the 1201 or the 1202 menus on my site and choose the option for the free videos. I'm going to do the 1202 since this is the 1202 study group. And the 1202 training course that we have here, there's a link right at the top that says, what's new in the 1202 exam? And you can read a detailed breakdown on our website where I go through and show you first, what are the time differences? You can see that the 1100 series was released on April the 20th of 2022. It retires on September 25th of 2025. And we're right here in this middle time frame where the 1200 series has been released. It was released on March 25th, and it's going to be around until September of 2028, we estimate. So right here is where we are. You probably wouldn't want to start studying this one because it ends in just a couple of months. Instead, start here because you have 3 years. That's the difference. That's the thing that makes a big difference. Now, the question that was asked, though, is what's new and what's different. So I have highlighted in a very broad way let's get rid of my face there so you can actually see it. This is a comparison between the 1102 exam and the 1202 exam. So you can see that there is the circle on the left is the 1102. The circle on the right is the 1202. Notice the circle on the right's a little bit bigger. That's because there are 580 objectives. If you counted all of those bullets in the exam objectives, for the 1102, there's 580 of them. But in the 1202, it's a little bit beefier. It's a little bit bigger. 665 objectives. You'll also notice there's a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue here. The yellow are the objectives that were dropped, 47 of them. And the blue are the objectives that were added. 122 of them were brand new. So 18% of the new exam is information you will not find on the 1102. It's all brand new. But here's the good part, is that look at the middle green circle. The middle green shows that 80% of the objectives between the 1102 and the 1202, identical. Exactly the same. So there's a couple of reasons for that. The biggest reason is that the 1102 was released before COVID, and then COVID hit, and there was a year where the technology industry really didn't do very much. Normally, when a new version of the A+ exam comes out, there is a new version of Windows. Well, there wasn't this time because the world slowed down quite a bit. So Windows 11 was the version that was out when the 1100 series was released. Windows 11 is still the version that's out when the 1200 series is released. So that big chunk in the middle right there, that is really telling you, yep, there's a lot here that is the same between both of those exams. And that's one of the reasons why. This works in your favor, by the way, because now if you did need to move from one exam version to the other, it's not a huge hit. But I will caution you, however, because 18% of the exam is things you did not see in the 1102, you really do need to make sure that you're using materials specifically written for the 1202 exam, or you're going to miss information that could very well cause you to fail this exam if you were studying from older study materials. So much has changed. Just enough has changed. So that's something to know about. Now, if you want to know exactly what has changed, if you keep scrolling down this document, I go through and tell you what topics on the 1102 were dropped from the 1202. So you can see exactly things like some command line options aren't in there. The ext3 file system is no longer in there. The security options, autoplay, static WAN IPs, changing channels is no longer in there. Software troubleshooting has AirDrop is no longer in there. But notice a lot of things there's nothing to talk about because only 20% of the exam is new. Well, let's keep going. What about things that were added to the 1202 exam? I document all of those as well, every domain and every subdomain. So for example, today we talked about REFS. That was something that was added to section 1.1 of the 1202 exam. A lot of other things were added as well. You can see the big list that I have. This is not a comprehensive list, but it's pretty close because there just wasn't that much that was changed. So all of that, if you would like to find this article, you could, of course, search for what are the differences between the 1102 and 1202, or you can simply go to the top of the 1202 video index page. That's what this is. Those are all the videos for the 1202 exam. Scroll, scroll, scroll. We did a lot of videos. There were a lot of, this was a lot of time to do all of these videos for the 1201 and 1202. But right at the top is the link for the differences. Maybe that will give you some context on what those differences are, Daniel, so that you understand why you might or might not want to use earlier study materials for this latest version of the exam. Something to consider. Let's keep going through this list. For those of you that have worked on these certification exams before, you know that it's a lot of information, but the information never ends. You're constantly learning more information. You're constantly getting updated on things that are happening in the world. And one of the questions I got was from PN, who says, where do you go to stay up to date on the latest technology news? This is a bit of a challenge, of course. The idea of getting technology news is a challenging one in itself. And as I've often mentioned in previous study groups, it's very difficult to find a reputable location on the internet to get technology news. Part of the problem with publishing, especially news publishing in the last 10 years, is that the internet has completely changed the entire area of publishing. So places that would rely on detailed investigative analysis, they would go through and have seasoned journalists that are familiar with technology that could report on this technology. Well, their business models couldn't take it. They couldn't handle it, and those organizations no longer exist. So now you have a lot less quality available, but you could still find little nuggets of information that are high quality. Normally now I go to individuals to find some of the information that I need that are focusing on these topics, but it's very difficult to find good news on technology. One of the things I often say is, especially to family members who are not in IT and they're not technical, they'll go to a mainstream news source. Not that any of these mainstream news sources are good or bad with news, but they're just not very good with technology. They're not technologists. They're reporters. They're journalists. They're great at reporting information and putting it online, but they don't know how computers work. They don't know how networks work. They don't understand the details. There was the great article from last week, for example, that made the news in all of the largest media outlets, was that the blue screen of death is going away. You probably saw this article last week. Well, it's not going away. They're just changing the format of the screen, and it's now black and not blue. But it's the same information. It's still an error screen that stops the entire operating system and causes you to have to restart the system. The function is exactly the same. There's nothing different. But people who are not technology knowledgeable said, it's over. No more blue screen, everybody. We got rid of it. Oh, no, you didn't get rid of it. Stop that. But they run with it. And all they have to do is say, we saw that this place reported it, and we're simply reporting to you that this place reported it. It gives them an excuse to put information on the internet and make no claims as to its veracity. So that is the problem that we run into with really all media. It's very difficult, and you really do have to dig into these articles. So I've kind of focused on finding very specific people to go to. For example, why am I looking at myself twice? For example, let's go to a good one would be Krebs on Security. This is a very good example of what I mean. Krebs on Security is Brian Krebs. He is old school journalist that is very knowledgeable in the technology, focuses not only on malware and some of the organized crime associated with malware, he also focuses on a number of topics with technology, and he knows the stuff. He's familiar with it. He is a technologist. So a lot of the things he writes about are things you can trust. So those are the types of places I tend to go these days, because I don't want to have to read a big article that somebody put on a website and then for some reason have to decipher what it is they saw into what's really happening. I don't have to do that on Brian's site. He is spot on with what he's trying to do. For example, here's an example of categories. DDoS for hire. He focuses on security, of course, how to break into security, Internet of Things issues, the latest warnings, security tools, SIM swapping, and some of the investigative reporting that he has done regarding malware, worms, denial of service attacks is amazing in the information that he's able to gather. If you want to be more scared about security, read Brian Krebs' articles so that you can be properly positioned. You can be properly scared and be really concerned about the things that are out there, because it's a bit of a challenge to make that happen. So that's where I go these days to be able to do that. So Microsoft got rid of the blue screen of death, everybody. No more blue screens. We got it all taken care of. Thank you, large media conglomerate, for telling me about that. Let's do some more questions, shall we? We'll keep going through our list of questions. Of course, you can submit questions at any time by going to the link on your screen, professormesser.com /QA. And I will, of course, I don't know if I have a big list of all of these individuals that I go to. A lot of them I roll up and base on what I'm reading. Some of them I get updates on Reddit. A lot of them are not on Reddit, however. So it's sort of a mixture of these Twitter accounts, these Reddit folks, these YouTube channels, and a couple of blogs that are there. So it's a mix to find the exact thing that you might need. Find the ones that work for you. And I have such a large grouping across technology that my list probably would not apply to really much of anyone. Since I'm sort of interested in operating systems and Windows and Linux, but I want to know about packets at the protocol level, looking at all the packets. I also want to know about security and next generation firewalls and the technologies around those. It's a very broad smattering of all of those things. Let's go through some more questions that you have submitted to me. Let's see. Let's get through these right here. Okay, I'm going to take this one. This is a great question. Kind of goes through like 6 or 7 things that I'm constantly asked about, and I think this might be good for all of us to look at. Nikki asks, "Good afternoon, Professor. I'm a 19 years old, a computer science student at a university in Canada. Because of a few personal struggles that have gotten in the way of my schooling, I've been considering quitting school for a year to work IT in a help desk or whatever work I can find in the field. I've been spending my summer studying for the A+ exam, other certificates, ITF, whatever Microsoft offers. Do you think I'm being foolish and should just finish my degree, or should I go about my IT career my way?" Well, this is probably one of the top 5 questions I get. Not exactly to this degree, but certainly the same struggle and the same challenge that many people have trying to decide what the best path is to be able to get through the industry or get into the industry, get a job or get a better job in IT. I do have a video that is in the YouTube video description of this study group and of my previous study groups as well. And it talks about how to get a job in IT with no experience. That's the name of the video. The video is designed to give you the perspective of what a hiring manager is looking for. And so I really focus on 4 individual elements, I call them in the video. The first one is a formal degree. May not necessarily be what you wanted to hear, Nikki, but having the formal degree is important for the hiring manager. They know that you were involved in something that took you years to get through. It was a number of different tasks and classes and topics that you had to learn to get through all of that. And if nothing else, it proves that you are trainable. It proves that you can learn these things. That's not something everybody has the skill for. So hopefully your degree that you come up with, that you decide on, that you complete, is one that somehow applies or can be applied into technology, but it doesn't have to be. I worked with a lot of people in technology that were liberal arts. They have a degree in literature. They have a degree in something other than business or economics or computing. There's not a lot of degrees out there for computing, relatively speaking. So this is one of those examples where it doesn't seem like a degree in economics, a business management degree, a business marketing degree, a biology degree. It doesn't seem like these degrees would fit into the world of technology, but they really do. They're difficult degrees to get. And then on top of that, there is a proof there that you know what you're doing. So that's your first element. Second element is you get an industry certification. That's one we certainly all here understand and can appreciate. And that's something you may want to consider doing anyway, especially if you're interested in going into IT. Now, notice that is an and. We need you to have a formal degree and we need you to have these industry certifications. These are 2 things that should go together. They don't replace each other. You don't swap out a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree for a set of industry certifications. These are different credentials that apply a different set of learning tasks and a different set of criteria that you will put on your resume, your CV. So it's not one or the other. You really do need both. And if you are a year away from getting through your formal degree, why would you stop now? Just get through that year. You could also work part-time in IT. There may be someone who is looking for help desk people that are part-time, or you can fit it in either when you're not taking classes or at nights and weekends. That's what I did going through college. Is I worked in my local computing center, and I was a student in school. But after I think the night session, the night shift was 4 to 11, I think it was. Trying to think back to the days of when I was there. So we would start at 3 or 4 o'clock, and then I worked at 10 or 11 at night. But it was an environment where most of the time you're waiting for print output to come off the printer. You're waiting for someone to ask you to mount a tape on a tape drive. These were back in the days of mainframes. So most of the time you're reading your homework. Most of the time you're writing and making notes for things that you needed to do in your classes. So it was a great 1-2 combination. You were effectively babysitting the computers. Now, if something went wrong, you were on the phone and you're trying to fix the problem. That's a different kind of issue. But most of the time, these computers take care of themselves, and you can simply sit down and do the work you need to do. So you might be able to do both of these simultaneously. And if you can, that might be something you might want to consider. I would not recommend stopping your formal education studies to get a job in IT. That part doesn't make sense to me. Can it be done? It can. One of the things you may run into, and this did happen with an associate of mine who worked up to a relatively high level in the organization that I was also in, the company that we both worked for. I had a degree in business management, but he did not complete his college degree. But he was in a higher level than me in the organization. He made more money than I did in the organization. He was relatively successful, but it's a very good example of how a formal education doesn't necessarily mean you're better or worse at the job that you do. It's all about the training that you get prior to taking that job. But one of the things he wanted to potentially do was move into management within the company. And there was a strict rule for some reason that said, well, you can't be a manager unless you have a 4-year degree. He did not have a 4-year degree, therefore he couldn't be a manager. So in my mind, however, I guess it depends on your perspective. To me, I asked him, why would you want to be a manager? Have you lost your mind? Have you perhaps lost any focus on what reality is? Are you on drugs? Are you having some type of mental breakdown? We should probably talk to a professional if you want to be a manager instead of doing what you're doing now. And then we all laughed about it. And I said, no, really, don't be a manager. Why would you? No. And I'm only saying that because I went into the world of IT management. I became a systems engineer manager for a group of systems engineers in the Southeast United States. Hated it. For those of you that were working underneath me, I think I did an okay job. I think I did all right. I tried to make it at least as smooth, easy, and well run as I could. I just didn't like it. Just wasn't my thing. I was much more a technical person, taking a problem, solving a problem, going to the next problem. That's where I really excelled, and that's what I enjoyed. Being on the management side was not what I liked at all. So when you get into technology, that's one of the things they often say is you want to move up so you get into the management role. I'm like, no. That's not what you do. You find a better technical role. That's what you do to be able to do that. So that's one thing to consider, is that if you do leave school, this could potentially affect you in the future. And I know you may not even be anywhere close to that. That may seem like it is a lifetime before you'd ever hit that point, but it is something to consider. These things happen faster than you might think. The third element in that video is having some type of experience. And doesn't have to be professional experience. And by that, I mean, it doesn't have to be something where people are paying you for a job. You could be taking care of all the computers at your church. Maybe you work for an organization or your local library, and you take care of all of their computers. You make sure that the antivirus is up to date, that everything is working as it should. You swap out any hardware that might have a problem. There are things that you can volunteer for that can give you experience that you then can put on your resume and talk about it when you're in an interview. And that's really the important part of that. Every bit of type of training you get, wherever it is, whether it's hands-on, on the job, some type of just hosting or guesting, being able to provide that's great. So you've got advantages there. And then the fourth element that I mentioned, how to get a job in IT with no experience. The fourth thing you should know is someone who already works there. So there is that thing that people say that it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's not exactly accurate. What that should say is it's not only what you know, it's also who you know. You have to have both of these things working for you. And having someone who already works in that organization means that you're able to get your resume to the top of the lists. That means that they might require you to come in and do a resume. And the fact that it's just an acquaintance, it's a professional acquaintance. You're not spending time at their house on the weekends. You're not going out and having dinners and drinks. You're not going to their child's christening. You're simply meeting them at a trade show. You're meeting them at a user group meeting. You've seen them before. You've talked over pizza at one of these technical meetups, and you ask them, oh, you work in that big building down the street. You guys have any openings for help desk there? Oh, you do. And in fact, they will often ask you for the resume, because if they hand in your resume, they get a finder's fee. There's a win-win. So you meet somebody at a big company, they've got an open position, you send them your resume pronto. They forward it to HR, they bring you in for a meeting, you talk about all the things that you have done, and now you've got the job. There's how you get your job in IT. You get your foot in the door. And by the way, it doesn't matter what job they offer you, take it. Get into IT. It is so much easier to get your second job in IT than your first job ever was. Once you get in the door, it's almost like all of those issues, concerns, and problems you had getting that first job just fall right away. So that's my recommendation to you is you could leave school and you could get a certification and you could find a job working in a help desk. That could absolutely happen. And maybe based on the things happening in your world, maybe that is the right path for you. But I would not give up on the formal education. I think you should, if you ultimately decide to leave that last year, I think you should set a formal plan for when you go back and finish up. Otherwise, you're not going to. Because once you get out, it's difficult to squeeze yourself back in there. Make sure that's something that you consider. I think that formal education is still super important. And although I have constantly questioned the true value of a formal education. I've mentioned this before in other study groups. I'm not the only one in the world who's mentioned this. It seems like every college or university tends to train you on things that have nothing to do with how this particular task or this particular world exists outside the school. But I think that's how they get a few extra hours out of you, because you have to pay for all of those hours. So one of the things that I tell people is get the paper. Get that piece of paper from the university. You don't even have to do anything with that major. You don't have to do anything with that formal education that you've got other than show people that you have it. Yep, I went through these 2 years. I went through these 4 years. Here's what I got out of this. Here's the information. Here's the piece of paper that proves that I got my diploma. Now we can talk about technology. So that's where I would focus too. That's my question for you. Have an idea and see if that makes sense for some of the things you're working on. This is a question that I look forward to getting your angry letters about. These are always good when this comes up. And I have a feeling, I have a sneaking suspicion this is more of a troll, but we're going to ask the question anyway. This is from a good friend Anonymous, who asks, "Hello, Professor. What do you think of Al?" One says, "What do you think of AI and how you can help to customize and improve the learning and teaching experience?" Talking about these types of certifications. Well, as we have probably seen, what you've probably seen with artificial intelligence is the A is much larger than the I. There's a lot of artificial, there's not much intelligence in it, at least from the perspective of what we need to do from a learning or training perspective. The problem, of course, is that artificial intelligence and the way that it works is by looking through data and making inferences and decisions about the multiple types of data that it has and presents to you a final answer that is taken all of that information and conglomerated it and stuck it together and looked at it and evaluated it and says, here's the answer. And what we found is that it's about 70% accurate. That's it. Their 30% of the time is just completely wrong. It's getting better by tenths of a percentage. They keep working on it. I noticed that ChatGPT got much better lately because instead of giving you specific answers, they now give you very broad answers, very generic answers that you can't necessarily say are wrong. It's giving you answers as if they are a politician. While I understand this, it could also be that. That's not an answer. That's not what we were looking for. So what we have found, I've done a number of studies on this because who wouldn't want to do this? I could tell it, make 1 million test questions for me, and it would make 1 million test questions. Turns out the questions that it makes are just awful. They are either not accurate to the exam objectives that I gave it. The questions have nothing to do with the type of thing that you need to learn, or the questions and answers themselves are just plain wrong. They're just not very good. And this applies across the board. People in the chat room are asking me, yeah, but have you tried this? Or have you tried this AI? What about this other AI engine? They're all bad. They're all not very good when it comes to this specific task. Now, having an AI that can create interesting visual displays, they do that very well. Give me a cat sitting on a couch, drinking a lemonade. Boom, here's a picture of a cat sitting on a couch drinking lemonade. I'm not sure the value of that, but there it is. It does that very well. And I think that as an industry, we're in, if you've ever looked at Gartner, they are an industry analyst company. They have something called the Gartner hype cycle or the hype curve. That when a new technology comes out, in fact, I should just find this. Why am I talking about this? Gartner hype cycle. Let's have a look at the hype cycle, shall we? I probably have a picture of the hype. Thank you, Wikipedia. You have a picture of the hype cycle. This is the Gartner hype cycle. Oh, look, it's AI. It's going to solve all of our problems. Oh, wait. It doesn't do anything that we thought it would do. Well, actually, it sort of does some of it. And that's where we end up. That in a 10-second snippet is an explanation of the Gartner hype cycle. We're probably right about here. We're coming down the peak of inflated expectations on our way to the trough of disillusionment. And hopefully we will eventually make our way up the slope of enlightenment and ultimately find our way to the plateau of productivity. So there are things that we are all extremely excited about regarding AI. AI excels at taking massively large data sources and finding things in that data source that a human could never find, making correlations of this data that a human simply cannot. These models excel at that, and they're very good at that. But that's not what we're doing. We're saying that we need training materials for industry certification exams. These training materials need to teach us on what's important. They need to teach us in a way that matches the expectations of the certification group, and it needs to be accurate. AI fails at all three of those currently. Plus, we're sort of applying the term AI to everything. It's like somebody has a big stamp, and they're just stamping everything AI. Oh, you're buying a new car? The new car comes with AI. Oh, are you purchasing some tea to drink later today? That tea has been created using AI. We're just putting it everywhere because I guess we're in that peak of inflated expectations. Well, the hype curve is alive and kicking when it works through there. So that is why I often tell people, if you need to make a pretty picture, go use some of those generative AI tools that are available out there. I love the pretty pictures that they make. So I think that's a great use of it. There is other tools, though, that people would like to use to help them study. I can't endorse any of them. They're all bad. They are all not ready for certification studies yet. Maybe they will someday approach or get better to what they're doing, but right now they are horrible study tools. You do not want to use them to be able to put in, at least not to be able to create any trust in the things that you're reading, because they are constantly incorrect, teaching you information that's not accurate for the exam. And then on top of that, they're just not they're not made to present you with information in the same way that you will receive it on an actual exam. So there you go. That is my somewhat focused and unfocused perspective of AI. I always get tons of emails after I mention this where people say, no, it's really good. No, you should. I've already used it. I've already done all the tests. I constantly go through these tests. I wouldn't talk about it unless I did. So this is, if you are using it to study, I would highly recommend you double check everything it tells you, which sort of defeats the purpose of a study material. Why don't you just get good study material to start with, is my recommendation. So I'm not, from a person who creates content on the internet to help you study for things, I'm not too worried about AI as a competitor, but I am concerned that people put too much trust in it and think that they are doing well to study with it, when in reality, they're being fed completely wrong information. But because you're studying, you don't know that the information it's giving you is wrong. Someone who knows the material knows the information is wrong. But that's the problem, is that AI is just wrong too often to be able to trust it with something as important as an industry certification. So that's my somewhat slanted, I would in some ways say biased, but only biased because I've gone through the process of going through all of these AI models and trying to get them to work, and they simply don't. So I wouldn't rely on them. I would not recommend that you rely on them either. I don't use them. And by the way, nothing that is in any of my study materials, my videos, my website, none of the content that I'm writing, none of the data that I'm providing to you, none of the text on the screen has ever been generated with AI on my site. None of it. There is AI on my site. After I badmouth AI all this time, I use a lot of AI, and I've already used it in my A+ courses. Can you guess where? Let's have a look. So I'm going to go to my Core 1 videos just so you can get a perspective of these. We'll make the screen very big. So you'll notice that in the videos on my training course, now my startup screens have this very interesting paper art style to it. These are real pictures that have been turned into this paper art. In many cases, they're real pictures that have turned into this paper art piece. So a lot of these are actual pictures that have been modified using AI. But I get these from Adobe, and Adobe pays the people that made the original picture when I use them. So I am helping to support a photographer who made a real picture of this thing. We just made it look kind of cool with AI, and I'm using that graphic in my charts, in my courses. Nothing else in my course is AI, however. That's it. None of the text, none of all of the graphics that I create, those block diagrams, the network diagrams, the information you see on the screen, all of those are real. All of those are real things. We're just currently not at a place where we can trust AI to provide any level of quality output from those. So everything else in the course is all mine and will continue to be so, because I know it's accurate and I know it's information that will help you pass the exam. So there you go. That's something I think might help you if you ever get into the world of trying to train or get an industry certification using one of those one of those AI engines. It's just not a good place to be, at least not at the moment. Maybe it'll get better in the future. Who knows? We'll see. Let's keep going through this piece of it. So here's a question. This is one that I get a lot of as we are moving in closer to the expiration dates for the A+ exams, from William, who says, will 6 weeks be enough time to study the Core 2 220-1102 before expiration for someone who has a full-time job? We're getting close to it, aren't we? So if we were to look at the calendar now, we're almost in the middle of July, August, September 25th. So you've got 2.5 months to study for one exam. I think you could do it. There's a little pressure there. It is a relatively tight time frame. You don't have a lot of extra room in there, but you could do it, I think. I often say that the average for most people is somewhere between 2 and 3 months to study for one of these exams. Well, you're right there in the middle of that right now, aren't you? 2.5 months is what you got. So this is about it. We can put a stake in the ground right here. Anybody who's watching, anybody who's listening, on July the 10th of 2025, I would say right now is probably the time where you might want to reconsider what direction you're going. Now, for William, it sounds like you have already taken and passed your 220-1101. So if that's the case, absolutely try to take the 1102 before you run out of time. That's just a good use. You don't want to lose the investment you've already made and the money you've already invested in the 1101. Try to finish up and get that 1102. You've got 2.5 months. I think that's plenty of time for anybody, regardless of how much knowledge you have in IT. But this is about it. Once you get to the end of July, it's going to be tight. It's going to be tough. That's a very tight time frame with only 2 months left. So you're at about this point where you will need to make a decision. And if you have already passed your 1101, absolutely go through and get that 1102 right now. Get the certification, lock it down. Don't wait until the 25th of September. Take it a little bit ahead, because if you need a retake, you need enough time to be able to book that retake. So do it maybe a week before the expiration date. And then as we get closer to the end, all of the online slots start filling up immediately. So you might even want to give yourself 2 weeks before middle of September. See how this works? So you have to think about all these different logistics. There's these time constraints. There's these date constraints. There's issues with that. So if you have not taken your 1101, if you've not passed the other exam, just go over and just shift right now over to the 1200 series. So that's what I would recommend. Just do that. There's so few changes that it should be a relatively easy transition, especially when you compare it to previous exam versions. So I would say that 6 weeks is enough time. You could study and pass your 220-1102. If you have no experience in IT and you have another full-time job somewhere else, you will need to carve out some time. You didn't mention if there's kids at home, how old they are, if you have to go to soccer practice, if there may be other things in your world you have to deal with, or you may be able to come home at night and really focus on study. So that will make a difference on if you're able to do this in time. But if you've already passed your 1101, just study as much as you can. When the 1st of September gets here, make a decision. Can we go take this exam or not? Should we invest the money in this exam, or should we cut our losses and start over? You're going to make that decision yourself. I think you got enough time. I think you can do it. So I think if you set up a policy, set up a set of schedule, set of procedures, you know when you're going to study, you know how much time you're going to have available, you can absolutely get this done before September the 25th. I would love to hear the story of how this turns out. William, I will wait the 2.5 months. I want to know how this turns out. So please absolutely include me when you decide what the next step will be in that piece of it. I think we got time. We're close to the top of the hour. Let's fit in another question or two that we have in this list. I have a relatively tight time frame today to work through this. Other questions. Folks in here have put information, not really a question. A number of you, like Freddie, have passed your 1102 and you're in your A+ certification. I just want to send my congratulations out to Freddie on getting that A+, and you got the 1102 before you had to worry about the September timeframe. Now you're certified for 3 years. Pressure's off. Congratulations and welcome, and maybe we'll see you over on the Network Plus or the Security Plus side. Might be something good to do. Since we're talking about time frames, I am going to take this question that talks about Security Plus. Professor, I have a question on Security Plus, if you don't mind. I started studying for my Security Plus a few days ago. My exam is on the 31st. What? What is this time frame? What are your recommendations for first-time studiers of the Security Plus and anything I should focus on or look out for? So this is one where somebody has a very tight time frame to be able to study for their exam. What are my recommendations to fit everything into this very, very short time frame for study? And I think it can really only be one very specific recommendation. And that recommendation is, there's your checklist, the exam objectives. Now, this is the one for A+. You're taking Security Plus, bring in the Security Plus exam objectives. Maybe that's what I should do. So the question was on Security Plus. I'm pretty sure I have some Security Plus exam objectives right here. Let me find them in my list. Click, 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 click. Let's go down to Security Plus. And let's click the 701. That is the current version of the Security Plus. And let's look at the latest V6 version of Security Plus exam objectives. So there's the SY0701. What I would do if I were you, you're working towards the 31st, you go to the first section of the first domain, General Security Concepts, section 1.1, compare and contrast various types of security controls. This is your checklist. You should go through every bullet and explain to yourself or someone else what that is, how it works, and why it's important. Do it for everything in section 1.1. This is a PDF, so you could even highlight different things. Let's say when you finish doing a section, you mark it in green. So I went through categories, and I got the technical ones. I went through managerial. I understand all of those. We're good. Now, control types. Okay, we'll start with control types. I know what control types are and how they fit into the big scheme of things. Preventive, I know what those are. Deterrent, I don't know if I know deterrent as well as I should, so I'm going to mark that one as yellow. I'm mark corrective as yellow as well. So this is giving me some insight into where I should go back and study a bit more. So let's do this with all the topics. Go through the entire set of exam objectives. If we know that everything good is green, maybe we leave it blank and we only focus on things we don't know. So we can go through this list and maybe choose the topics that we want to spend more time on. And now when you're done with this, you now have a good set of objectives and topics that you know what to focus on. So now you're looking at just these topics. This helps you in a couple of ways. First, it gets rid of everything you already know about. You don't have to go back and look at those. The second one is you are clearly only focusing on things that are guaranteed to be on the exam. And that is exactly what these exam objectives are. So you know you're studying the right things. So if you go through this entire process and now you have an entire set, this for Security Plus, there's a lot of pages of exam objectives. Go through this entire list. And now you know exactly what topics are going to be important. That's where you spend your time. That's it. Go through all of the topics you marked. That's where you do your studying. And you just focus on you have limited time. You don't have 3 months. So you're going to have to do something to shorten that time frame. Will it be enough? I don't know. That really depends on your specific industry experience and how fast you can study with these topics. Different people study at different rates. Different people come to the table with a different set of knowledge, of foundational knowledge. So your study time may be really different. So that's why I tell people all the time, if you're short of time, go to the objectives. That's your checklist. That's where you're going to be spending all of your time to be able to understand where you need to focus on studying this. Now, ideally, the chat room's even mentioning, why is this so short of time? This happens sometimes, where maybe you started a job and the job requires you to have Security Plus and they're giving you until the end of the month to get it because people who work in management positions have no concept of reality. So, and I can say that because I used to work in a management position where I had no concept of reality. So I think focusing on the exam objectives really is the fastest way to go through this. Don't worry about what other people are saying, what other topics they're telling you should study, other things that are not on the list. If it's not on the list, don't study it. If it's on the list and you don't know it, study it. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. So focus on that. I think that is your best strategy for success. Your best strategy for success is to study until you know all of them and then take the exam. But sometimes the world doesn't allow us to do that. So that's why I would focus on that. I'll also tell you, because we're focusing on the objectives, this has come up a couple of times in the chat room, you should only study from materials that match the version of the exam that you are planning to take. So if you're planning to take for A+, let's say you're planning to take the 220-1202 exam. That's the one that this entire study group, the first hour of this study group was on, was the 220-1202. Do not go back to materials that have been written for a previous version of the exam. Do not study from those. So it may be relatively easy for you to find a book that was written for the 220-1102. Don't study from those. Information in this book has been dropped from the new exam, and 20% of the information you need for the new exam isn't even in the book. So how are you expecting to pass your exam if you don't even have the material you need to study? So that's why I tell people, if you got older material, just put them away. Throw them out, stick them somewhere else. Don't look at them. You need newer material. So there is an investment in the newer material you may have to make. You may have to purchase new books. You may have to get new labs. You may have to get new Q&A. Always get materials that match the version of the exam you are planning to take. So if you're planning to take the 1102 exam, you would not study from 1202 materials. So it works in both directions. Only study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. That's my recommendation to you. Not everybody does this. And then they show up in my Discord and say, I didn't pass my exam. I took the 1202, but I studied from 1102. I thought they were the same. They were not. I was asked things I've never seen. And that's what happens. You don't want to be in that position. These exams are not cheap. They're not inexpensive to be able to take. So that's why I tell people, plan. Be sure about what you are studying and make sure you study the right things. And along those same lines, Mark asks, all right, well, does the IT industry value newer certs over older certs? Well, it would if there was such a thing, but there is not. If you take the 1100 series exams and you pass both of those, you are A+ certified. If you take the 1200 series exams and you pass both of those, you're A+ certified. It's the same A+ certification. The certification itself is not, this is a newer A+ cert or this is an older A+ cert. It's simply an A+ cert. It's exactly the same certification. The certification itself doesn't even have the name of the exam numbers you took on it. And if you think about it, that makes sense. What if you took your A+ exams and got certified 10 years ago? And every 3 years, you renew your certification. So you've renewed it now 3 times. And let's say that the person you work with just passed their 1201 and 1202. They're now newly A+ certified. Somebody who has updated your certification for the last 9 or 10 years is just as A+ certified as the person who took the most recent set of exams and passed those today and became certified today. It's the same certification. Nobody in the industry really cares which exams you ultimately took to earn your A+. All they care about is that you have the A+. Now, I realize I expect cards and letters for this one as well. Obviously, if you are in a job where you are teaching these versions of the exam, I realize it's a little bit different. You are required to get that particular version of the exam. You're different. You're an unusual bird. You are not a normal person. You're a trainer. So that's different. We work in a different world. For the rest of the world, doesn't matter which you take. Just take and pass both of them and get the A+ cert. That's all employers care about. Are you A+ certified? That's it. If you got that, you got everything. And that's the goal, is to get you that certification. People often say, yeah, but it doesn't teach you everything you need to know about IT. Well, are you saying there is something I can take that will teach me everything I need to know about IT? Because that thing doesn't exist either. The certifications cover a very specific set of topics so that when you present your certification to someone, they know that you have a basic understanding of these things. It's not designed to replace experience. It's not designed to replace your formal education. It's not designed to replace knowing somebody who works in that company. It's designed to prove to somebody that you have a basic understanding of these particular tasks and skills. And that understanding and that certification is well accepted in the IT industry. It is a very good credential to have. Employers love those credentials. And if employers love them, that's why we take these certifications. So it really is a two-way street. We're studying and learning things we didn't know about. We're learning about these technologies. That's the thing we often forget about when we look at these certification exams, is that we actually learned something at the end of this. This was actually a valuable use of our time that taught us about hardware and networking and security and cloud technologies and virtualization and troubleshooting and all of the things that we learned about in A+. These are great things to take with you for the rest of your IT career. So there is that part of it. And on top of that, employers like it. And if employers like it, that means I can get a job with this. That's a win-win. So if you're in the area where people, if you ever look on the internet and you see people, you should get that certification, that doesn't prove anything. Well, nobody's asking you to prove anything. This is about understanding technology and showing other people that you know what that technology does. There will be other ways to learn, other things that you're going to do in your career. There will be other technologies you work with that don't even have certifications associated with them. And there will be new technologies coming down the line that we have not invented yet, that obviously no certification exists for, but you're still going to need to know those things. So this is not the end of your education. This is not the end of you learning. This is not the end of technology. This is just the beginning. We are just starting this process. This is a lovely place to be. It's one of those where I look back at my early days in technology and think that was so much fun. Just the learning process was the fun process. And the thing you're learning about is so much fun. The technology itself is so much fun. It's always a different day. Every time you go into work, there's something different. Every time you're working on a problem, I'm that kind of person that I love a puzzle. Here's a puzzle. How do you fix it? And that is what we do. Every ticket is a puzzle. How do we fix it? How do we fix it the best way? And how can we make all of these things work together to solve the big problems that we're trying to solve with the organization that we work for, the company we work for, and we're able to make a good living at it and support ourselves and our family and really be comfortable in the things that we do. That's the goal that we have here. That's what we're trying to do with these training courses. I think we're able to make that kind of change and that kind of effect across the industry by making these free and available to anybody, anywhere in the world. Well, I think that gives us a place to talk about where we are now, which is 12 minutes after the top of the hour. I talked a little bit much today, but that's okay. At least I think it's okay. Working through the details of this as well. I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. We had such a good time in the first hour, and you did a great job with the questions, especially the brand new topics from the 220-1202 exam. Thank you so much for your questions that you gave us in our after show. This is one where we do this every month, so make sure you check the calendar for when the next set of study group sessions will be. If you are interested in Network Plus, for example, next week on Wednesday is our Network Plus study group. I still haven't written those questions yet. So this will be a whole new set of questions, and I don't even know what they'll be about yet, but I'll be sure to have all new questions when we get there on Wednesday. We'd love for you to come back Wednesday of next week and join us for our Network Plus study group. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.